Hi, my name is Teresa Anthony, and I will be presenting on Dr. Bobby Newman. I had never heard of Bobby Newman when I chose his name. I didn't know if he was alive or dead, but I ended up being very happy with my choice because I learned that he is very heavily involved with the autism population. So let me get my PowerPoint going. So a little bit about him. He is a doctorate level BCBA. He's also a licensed psychologist. He is an author and researcher. He is currently practicing and he resides in Long Beach, New York. He began his work with individuals with autism while in college, and he also in college began working with individuals with disabilities who are involved in law enforcement. And since college, he continued in the field and he's been working with this population for over 25 years now. He's the clinical services director of Room to Grow, which is an establishment that provides training, consultation to families, agencies, programs, and schools. So, from what I read, it sounds like he goes into these places and trains people on how to properly work with individuals with autism. He also provides outpatient therapy to individuals with autism, mood disorders, and anxiety disorders. In addition to that, he also teaches graduate courses for those pursuing their BCBA certificates. And little fun fact is that he's also a certified personal trainer and he enjoys running marathons, which I thought was really interesting. He has authored several books and articles. I think I counted 14, and his books are about topics of applied behavioral analysis, fitness, and phobias. He's conducted several research studies individually as well with other researchers. He's also a speaker and has given countless invited addresses and personal presentations. On his Room to Grow site, he actually has a link to his cover letter, which lists all of his books, all of his speeches, all of his research studies. I didn't reference anything from there because it was just pages and pages of it, which I think is just evidence of how involved he is in this community. So the research that I looked at, most of it, or even all of it, focused on the utilization of specific applied behavior analysis techniques with individuals with autism. He mainly worked with small groups of very young children. I read a lot using, or a lot of studies that use preschool students, and then a couple with adolescents who have autism. So some of the common themes I saw in his research was that he typically tested schedules of reinforcement. His research generally aimed to foster independence in student social interactions and language. And like I had mentioned, he used small groups for studies, as small as 3 students. And I learned that students with autism benefit from learning self-management techniques in order to be more independent. That was kind of an overarching theme that stood out to me. My mock interview, which I would actually be really interested to see his answers to this. So, does your background in psychology influence your work as a BCBA? And I am curious about this because I have a background in psychology and I am actually an outpatient therapist right now, in addition to being a special education aide. So I would love to hear how both of these fields influence one another. Second question, in your work with families, what do you find to be your biggest struggle with their child? So in his work with families, where he's offering training, consultation, what is the family's or parents' perspective of their child's behavior? I think it's always interesting to find out what the parents think. Number 3, I'm curious to see if he's found that autism is comorbid with a specific mood or anxiety disorder. 4, do you ever find that young students are misdiagnosed with autism? And I'm thinking preschool, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. And then 5, of course, what do you do for self-care and how do you balance your professional life, personal life, and me time? After reading about him, and learning that he loves to do marathons and he's a personal trainer. For me, all of that is self-care. So I'd be interested to see how he balances everything, as a lot of times I feel like there's not enough time in a day. So I think it would be fun to hear about how that plays out in his life. The implications of the literature. So after pulling out the common themes, these are some points that stood out to me. So fostering independence should be a focus in working with students with autism. A lot of his research aimed to foster independence or encourage independence or teach children how to be independent. And his research showed that teaching students self-management skills resulted in higher rates of social initiation and variability of play. Next, individuals with autism tend to be more compliant when given choices, and then reinforcing compliant behavior is important. So in the one research study, he found that actually reinforcing compliant behavior when there's choices is more significant than the actual content. So, for example, a couple of the students that I work with do not like being in social studies with their regular education class. So that's what we refer to it as, regular education class. So if you were to look at the content, that is actually less important than reinforcing their compliant behavior while in the classroom. I thought that was interesting. Next, research suggested that schedules of reinforcement should be utilized before employing any punishment procedures. Something that stood out to me was that none of the research that I read ever implemented any punishment procedures. It was all about reinforcement, and he found success in that, which I think is something as educators and therapists and ABA specialists is something that we can take into schools. And last, Newman provides approachable and applicable techniques that can be utilized in any school settings to benefit individuals with autism. So one of the things that I really liked about his research was that there's specific techniques that are easy to understand that I could literally take and start implementing the next day at school if I read through it enough and understand it, which I think is really important. And here are my references. Thank you.